Hi, I'm Don Mooers, and welcome to Montgomery Week in Review. The treatment of our elderly population in the healthcare system in Montgomery County will become more and more important as our population continues to age. Graciela Rivera-Oven, the host of Revista Semanal Montgomery, will tell us about a plan to get a grasp on the current situation. The League of Women Voters has just finished a statewide study on the voting process in our state of Maryland. Elaine Apter from the League is here. She's reviewed it. She's going to tell us some interesting new proposals for changing the way we may vote in the future in our great state. AC Nielsen, the polling company that calculates TV viewing habits, has recently published a study on marketing trends by Asian Americans. Here to discuss the results is Shu-Ping Chan from U.S. Asia Links. Cybersecurity is becoming a topic of interest to people who are concerned with their credit card accounts in light of the Target fiasco, as well as the privacy of their phone conversations, email conversations, and other discussions. Mariana Cordier, a local attorney, is here to discuss this issue. Gracie, are you okay?
Yes, allergies.
Oh, it's terrible.
I know, this weather is a very moody weather. So.
Well, the weather's affecting us all. It's affecting the elderly, maybe worst of all. Tell us a little bit about what's going on and your concerns, what's going on with the elderly population.
Well, I think as a community as a whole, especially in this area, we need to take a step back and look at how the elderly especially are treated in the health system. Mm-hmm. And with the increasing population of the elderly, I think the time has come to start planning what's in their best interest, especially when it comes to care.
Well, let's talk about that because, I mean, is Montgomery County getting older?
Statistics show yes, and the baby boomers, right? They're starting to retire and so on, and there's not such a big movement anymore. To places like Florida and so on, they're kind of staying where they are. So, and we also know that they're more involved in the community and they're healthier in some instances. But then and they're actually living longer. So it's not uncommon to see people now in their 90s, early 90s, and so on. So just from experience, I have a grandmother who's almost 93. We really need to see if in our hospital, especially locally, to start ensuring maybe that we need to start thinking about geriatric care. In the emergency rooms, we have a pediatric section. So when you have a young child who's under 18, you have a section where they're taken and the treatment is catered to that age. And we need to start doing the same.
Well, it seems to me that anytime they talk about, the population most likely to be affected by X will be children and the elderly. So to me, it seems like, if we're going to give special care for, children and pediatrics, we need to do the same for, our elderly population, because not only constitutionally, they may be more fragile, but they're also probably on different medications, so the management of all of that. And if you're in a hospital or in an emergency care or something like that, they need to be able to do that. And if you have someone on staff who's familiar with it, just seems like it would make things go more smoothly.
Yeah. Another thing would be is there are many elderly that are alone, that don't have somebody. They have out-of-town children, their spouse is gone, and when they are admitted to a hospital, or that they really need some help.
Someone to advocate
somebody
for them.
to advocate for them.
Yeah.
Right. And then you throw in the language barrier into that whole mix of ingredients.
Within Montgomery County, especially
Montgomery
diversity.
County, that we know is now a minority-majority county, and then things get more complicated. So I think the time has come, and there's some talks with Congressman Delaney and County Council President Rice to look at this issue as a holistic issue.
Well, why would it be a federal issue for Montgomery County?
Well, with the federal issue is the LEP laws. The LEP.
I'm sorry. What's an LEP?
It's the language English
limited English proficiency.
Limited English proficiency. where you have populations like Montgomery County, for example. By law, we have to have bilingual judges because of the large population of the Hispanic community. And that is to ensure that their rights are not violated. So with the same issue, it plays into the issues of health as well, and access
How
to
does this
health.
play into the Affordable Care Act in terms of
Exactly.
elderly?
Absolutely, and that's another good point. So it's not just the issue of the federal government or the issue of the local government, but I think it's a holistic issue, and that's the way it needs to be.
Well, families need
looked at.
to start the conversation, for individuals who have family members living nearby. What will happen, if X happens to me,
Right.
if I'm elderly? What type of care do I want? Do I want extraordinary care to prolong my life? If I am in a
Right.
vegetative or comatose type of state, or something
That
like
conversation just doesn't happen
No.
often enough,
No.
does
It,
it?
it doesn't happen often enough, and frankly, it's a conversation that people want to avoid. But it's when you're doing your wills, you need to do your wills,
Definitely.
and you have to do your living wills
And your power of
and your
attorney.
power of attorney, and you have to have that in place before you become ill, because when you're in emergency mode, it's a lot more difficult. And you would be amazed among siblings, for instance, who are dealing with a parent, how much of a different opinion they may have about medication, treatment, surgery, how far to go, and that conflict is very, very unfortunate, and the hospital really won't know who to listen to or who to take.
That's what I was
into
going to say. They have to have access to it too. The child has to know where it is, or the doctor, the primary care physician. Somebody needs access to that
Well, to
in
the-
a true emergency.
Well, to those documents, but simple
Right.
things like password accounts, passwords to your accounts. I mean, it might take you 3 or 4 weeks to figure out where the money, how to access your money.
More than that.
Or-
And if you pass away without having passed
Right.
those passwords, it could be forever.
Could be
Yeah.
forever, it's gonna be lost, yeah.
We've got about just 30 seconds. If you were queen of the jungle, what would you do?
I would do what we're doing now. As I would approach this issue as a holistic issue and have a very frank conversation with our health providers, and see how we can ensure that the best interests of seniors are taken at heart, and
Okay.
that we do the best for them.
I vote for you to be queen of the jungle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gracie. Elaine, welcome back.
Well, thanks. It's great to be back.
Okay, so we've got queen of the jungle and the elderly.
Right.
Now we move to you as we're talking about the League of Women Voters, future elections.
Right.
Things are
and-
going to change.
and-
What's going on?
Well, one of the things that we're talking about really has some context with the elderly, and that is one of the things we're looking at is possibly a permanent absentee list where, because many of the elderly, and you don't need an excuse now to
Right.
get an absentee ballot, so Maryland could actually have a permanent absentee list. And that list could either be used to get an application, or there are many states, about 13 of them, that you actually get the ballot. And that permanent, I know it scares people right
No,
away.
But let me take the devil's advocate position here a little bit. One of the issues that comes up, and not from voter suppression states, but from every state, is the viability of that voter list.
And
Is
that,
to make sure that make sure that people are actually voting. Now, in many states, Florida, for instance, they've taken it a step further and try to make sure that mostly Democrats are kept out as a Republican, and all
Right.
that shenanigans, lawsuits, and all that stuff. What about that
well,
security issue?
there has to be something in place, and there has to be criteria. Say if you don't vote in 3 or 4 elections, you're automatically removed from the list.
Right.
You also want to, if you send that ballot out or the application, you don't want it to be forwarded if it doesn't hit
Okay.
the right person. And some of those things, of course, if you get on an obituary list, hopefully they will eliminate your name. But it's things like that. But the other thing that you're talking about would be the signature on the ballot.
Yeah, tell me about the
And
signature.
do you know that Maryland does not verify signatures on absentee ballots? There is nothing there that they have to verify a signature. So that's one of the questions that is coming up. If you get more and more absentee ballots, And there are 2 states, Washington and Oregon, where it's all absentee ballots, all vote by mail. Though they verify, most of them verify signatures.
You know, it's very
where
interesting.
we don't.
Homeland Security, I know in my practice in immigration law, they verify signature to make sure that it's not the lawyer who's signing everything through some, just, I think, looking at oils that are left behind on the papers to make sure that there's multiple people have touched it, that it's the client that's touched it, they get biometrics in. It's so easy to understand whether or not somebody has actually handled if they don't want to go through the signature.
That's
We can't do these rudimentary.
And well,
Can't
the
you do
other
a
thing
fingerprint?
is
Why can't you do a
a
Doing
fingerprint.
any of
That
those
would be.
things, right.
I think that would be more
At this
accurate
point,
than even a signature.
93% of the voters of Maryland, the signatures are digitized because of the motor vehicle, because they go
Right.
through the motor vehicle. But your signature changes,
Fine,
there's no
right.
question about it. But you update your motor vehicle, you know, your driver's license or license, so that could change.
What about little buttons or whatever we take home, we just vote? I mean, it seems that that the whole idea of the community coming together on voting day, which is such an empowering day on the primary and the general, is kind of passé.
It is, but we were talking to somebody yesterday at one of our meetings, and they have a daughter in Oregon, and she said she really misses going to the polls and seeing her neighbors. It was a social event,
Right.
although it's much easier, and voting in Oregon has gone way up as far as the
Well,
percentage
because I think the
voting.
thing that we've seen the most is the push to get the young voters to go and vote has been the struggle.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
So I was going to say to have a process like Oregon where their numbers have gone up because they're all doing it via the mail. That seems like a more effective way of participating, even though we lose out on the socialization.
Right. The other thing, speaking of younger voters, is one of the questions is bringing an electronic device into the poll booth.
We've got about
The
45
cell
seconds
phone.
left in
a
this.
cell phone. I mean, they all get their information by cell phones, and a voter's guide or something like that they want to take in. So that's going to be a very interesting discussion.
Right, 'cause right now they're not
Right
permitted.
now, there's a big sign with the cell phone with the X.
Because you can call someone and they can influence your
You
vote
could call somebody
Okay.
to influence. You could take a picture of your ballot.
and sell
20
it.
Yeah.
We've got 20 seconds left. Final question here, Elaine. Things looking good, more participation do you see coming out of all of these discussions?
Oh, we really hope so. And of course, Montgomery, and we'll be back with this, there are 9 now early voting sites,
Okay.
and it's going to be good.
It's going to be good.
Everybody come out and vote.
Thanks, Elaine. We'll be right back after these messages. Shu-Ping Chan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Don.
You're always so enlightening when you're on here. We learn so much in your segments, and today we're going to learn more.
Well, yeah. Well, AC Nielsen, a lot of us know that company because they do the TV ratings.
The Nielsen ratings.
The Nielsen ratings, exactly. They put
Right.
a little monitor on your TV for families that get selected, and they monitor what you watch, and from that they extrapolate the data and see, 15 million people, 30 million people watch this particular show, and they get different ratings, and from that they can sell advertisements based on what their ratings are for a high price. That's how they work. But actually, Nielsen is a gigantic company. They do a lot of marketing studies. The TV rating is one part, and they come out with studies on different subsegments of the population.
Okay, which subsegment of the population are we talking about today?
Well, today we're talking about the Asian American, but they do studies on the Latino community, women,
let's get right to
soccer
I'm
moms,
not
African
here to talk about AC
American.
Nielsen. I'm here to talk about the Asian American community.
Soccer
What have we learned about it?
I was surprised that in the whole, generally, Asian Americans are more impulsive buyers than the general American person. I was
Really?
totally surprised.
You think
by
about
that.
you think about like very careful and
Planning and all of that,
studious,
exactly.
All those stereotypes. No.
No. It's
What's
more
going on
I have
here?
no idea. I have absolutely no idea. But another conclusion was that there's less brand loyalty because there's more flexibility in terms of price.
Okay.
So the Asian Americans will tend to buy things that are better priced and have a better perceived value. So they not going to stick with a specific brand because of I like the Bounty, I like the Ajax, whatever. But whatever is the best price or the best value for them. Tech savvy. Asian Americans are, I think, 30% more likely to buy something online. and also do consumer research online. So
Okay.
that's
Consumer research, though impulsive, they seem to be going against each other here.
I don't know, but I think that's probably the problem with studying a whole segment of a population that is so
You can't broad brush people
Well, but
who
I
come
mean,
from
exactly.
you know,
the largest part of the world.
exactly.
Well, your point about research, maybe it took a couple of days or whatever before, but nowadays you just Google it, and within a couple of minutes you can know, which one's the best this or that, or most
true.
popular, or have the features that you want, and then you can buy it impulsively.
Especially since the company's
online.
telling
I
you
can have
that
it
they're
done
great.
in a half
Right,
hour.
online and impulsive, I think definitely go
Good thing.
together.
So they're not
yes, I mean,
incompatible, right? There
yes,
could be something
Some of
together.
these shopping channels, that's
Yeah, well, that's exactly right.
you just
watch
go
TV
1, 2, 3, and it's
and
sold.
it's
Well, you
sold,
can't really
exactly.
trust much of the stuff anyway that you're seeing because the companies that are behind.
Oh, you're
look it
you're
up, look it
asking
up.
for logic and reason. I see.
and
Let me tell you,
How
from
he
the,
shops.
from the female perspective, when I go shopping, it doesn't always have to do with that. It has to do with what appeals to the eye, what
Right,
appeals to
right.
the
Yes.
sense of value. And
How do we appeal to you? Are we good?
you're not doing so well.
Well, I mean, Nielsen and all the marketing companies, I mean, obviously it's a gigantic industry out there. They find
Right.
out exactly, they come out with little subsegments with little acronyms, like remember DINKS, dual income, no kids. I mean, that is
Right.
a subsegment, and they buy things and live a certain lifestyle, and then you market to that subsegment.
Right.
Years ago, there was, what are they called, the POSIQs, person of opposite sex sharing living quarters, which is, a co-ed roommate basically nowadays. But that's another subsegment of single people who.
Again, we're going off topic. Asian Americans, what do we learn? What's the bottom line for you? If you
Bottom
were,
line is
again, you're king.
High.
What are you gonna do?
I'm the king of the jungle. Well, thank
Right.
you. Generally high income, higher income than the average American family.
Okay.
But then again, the distractors of this study saying that, well, a lot of Asian American population live in cities, and mostly cosmopolitan cities, where the cost of living is higher, therefore their income is higher. So
Okay.
on the whole, that explains the higher income on the whole.
Okay.
And also,
So not as much disposable income that we would think because so much is going
Exactly.
to rent or mortgage
Exactly.
and the necessities.
and 50% more likelihood of living in a multi-generational house, 3 generations. So the grandparents, the parents, and the kids live there. So that actually is a good marketing tool. I mean, a good segment to market to because you have 3 generation.
Right.
You can buy the diapers and the geriatric medications and what have you. As
one
well.
fell swoop?
And one
Have
fell swoop.
grandma babysit
One click of
Junior.
the button, right?
Exactly. So I mean, those are the types of studies. Those are the types of facets that are just little.
What's the,
nuggets,
we have 40
nuggets of-
seconds left, 30 seconds left. What was the most fascinating nugget for you as a member of that community to learn about yourself, or learn about the community you're in?
Well, it's high income, I think, but again, it goes back to broad brush. There's a large segment of the quote-unquote Asian American community that are not as successful as what what the model stereotype seems to suggest. So we look at that data. It's really important to sort of dig a little bit deeper to figure out exactly what those sub-nuggets are in terms of what the general conclusions might be.
We've learned so much yet again. Shu-Ping Chan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mariana Cordier.
Oui, comment ça?
Ça va bien. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Today's topic is cybersecurity.
Cybersecurity.
What's-
Hold on to your wallets.
Hold on to your wallet. Well,
Everything in it.
give us a little bit of a background. Why are you concerned today about cybersecurity?
Well, I think that, cybersecurity has this fancy name, but we haven't really, people don't define it in their mind off the bat. They think, this is Target, they got hacked, that's awful, or, Snowden released all this information, and the others say, they're in trouble, but we all knew they were listening. But what really deep down the concern should be is, are you protecting your personal information, your account information, and the people that you are doing business with or you're a customer of, are they, protecting your information? There are places and institutions that have a lot of personal information. One is the MVA, hospitals, schools, universities.
Sure.
And so, number one thing is you don't want someone to steal your identity and then incur a lot of debt.
But we
and
trust-
you have to deal with those issues.
We
You don't-
trust all these organizations. What's in it? How do we know that they're safeguarding our information?
Well, that's a very good question, because usually when you talk about the internet and your LANs, the networks, and everything. You have an IT person who's taking care of that, but an IT person could be just dealing with the computers and the software and the programs. They may not be necessarily taking care of the actual security. So we have to change our mindset as well in our corporations, companies, and individuals. Do you change the passwords to have good passwords so that you don't have the default password of a software that someone can get in? Be careful where you're going. You don't incur spyware onto your computer and malware. Is the university doing these? Are they taking these precautions? Maybe not. I never, even back before we were really into the computers like we are, when I was in college, I didn't like them using my social security number as my identification
all the
number.
time.
Yeah.
All
Well,
the time.
It's illegal now.
I was like, and I asked them, issue me a number, and I remember the attitude I got for, you want a number, and
You
now
got attitude from.
in retrospect,
Well,
was that or was it something else? No, but in retrospect, I have to say that I was grateful that I did that, and people really need to start thinking about this and imposing on the people who give us services or we buy from or whatever to have something in place.
Well, you had the Target hacking, and you had the University of Maryland hacking not too long ago.
Hopkins, the newest one is Hopkins.
Georgetown a few years ago. So, I think Georgetown last time was someone dropped a laptop somewhere and someone picked it up. It was possible. But the Maryland hacking, it seemed like it was professionals from overseas, probably from China, that purposefully.
A majority, people need to understand that the information that's out there now about hackers, a lot of them are state-sponsored hackers, and what they're going after is your information to access into financial institutions and stuff. And it's a very lucrative business. They're making a lot of money, and so we have to be a bit more savvy for protecting ourselves. Are we individually going to be able to stop someone from committing fraud? Probably not.
So I can't. So I can't go march into the MVA and say, I demand to know your plan for protecting my.
Well, I think as
information.
voters, we should ask the government to make the efforts to spend the money, and I know they hate that, but to protect our information, to have security. And keep in mind, no matter how good your security is, it's not going to be 100% foolproof. So you need to keep looking at your credit reports.
And even locally with the credit cards, I was just in South Africa and in Europe, and if you're in a restaurant or something, they bring the card reader to you. That card is never left out of my hands, my sight. Whereas we constantly give it to a waiter or a waitress, and it's gone, and we.
But you make a good point, because also in Europe is the card reader. You've got to put your code in.
Yes.
And we're so far. We're last century.
That is the credit
Why
card.
are we?
Credit card it's a
and
chip.
pin.
Exactly.
Yeah, most of Europe, and it's funny, most of the losses that Europe faces, from what I read in an article, is from their cards being used here.
Because the security
Right,
side.
and one of the excuses constantly is we can't afford it. Well,
No, I don't.
Can
I
we
don't-
not afford it?
how can we
That's
not
universal.
afford it? That's
Well, what can we do personally in terms of safeguarding our passwords and all of that?
Great end, because we have 40 seconds left.
Well,
Please.
the most, I think, successful tactic would be to, number one, be aware of what's going on in your accounts. Review your accounts. Don't just throw the statements away or ignore them or whatever. Know your bank account numbers and your passwords and change them. Not the accounts necessarily, but the passwords regularly. Don't save them on your phone. Don't put them in your emails, in case they get hacked. And one quick note to keep in mind, even if you do all of these things, lots of people give a lot of information on their social media, on Facebook. And people from that, knowing your kids' names,
Last word.
birthdays, all of that
Okay.
can get information to hack you.
Don't get hacked.
Don't get
The final
hacked.
word. You all, thank you for this great and lively show. And thank all of you in the viewing audience for joining us for this week's edition of Montgomery Week in Review. I'm Don Mooers. Please join us next week at this very same time.